I will never understand why people do things that make others angry. I went through life trying not to upset anyone, and it was probably too much for me to expect the same from others. I met my wife Linda when we were at school. From the age of 16, we were exclusive and everyone else knew it. We got married right after Linda's 21st birthday. My lifelong friend Alan Hunter was my best man, and Linda's sister Marie and her two nieces were bridesmaids. If you had asked me, I would have said Linda was beautiful and everything I wanted in a wife. We bought a nice house on a quiet street in a good area. 2 years after our wedding, Linda became pregnant with Nick, our son, and 18 months later gave birth to our daughter Gail. Since we only wanted 2 children, I had a vasectomy after Gail was born. By the way, my name is Don Simmons, and I work as a production manager for a company that makes specialty lifting machines and cranes. I make good money, so being a stay-at-home mom has never been a problem for Linda. That was until a problem arose a few years later. Linda was still a very attractive woman. Her C-cup breasts and cute ass still turned me on. It's a shame it did the same for someone else. I thought life was perfect, at least as perfect as it could be. The children were well-behaved, and we enjoyed a good social life. Once a month, my parents would pick up the kids so Linda and I could have a date night. We usually had dinner and then went to the club for a few hours, and when we returned home, we always made love. Linda was quite loud when she climaxed, and it was good that there were no children at home. My so-called perfect life came crashing down on Wednesday afternoon. I was at the dentist and decided to go home straight after. It was quiet at work, so I wouldn't be missed during the day. I entered the house and froze in place. The noise I heard upstairs suggested that Linda was either having fun with a toy or she had a man there. I quietly crept upstairs, deciding that if she was alone, then it would be stupid to miss the afternoon sex. Looks like Linda had the same idea. I looked outside our bedroom door and saw my so-called friend Alan Carter having it. Losing my temper, I burst into the room. "Bastard!" I yelled. I threw a punch that hit Alan in the jaw. He screamed in pain and fell off the bed. Linda screamed and frantically covered herself. "Don, why the hell are you at home?" she asked stupidly. "I live here in case you forgot," I replied, returning my attention to this asshole. Grabbing him by the hair, I pulled him towards me and punched him several times in the face and stomach. My parting blow was a blow to the groin. "Get out of my house, you bastard!" As soon as he had his clothes on, I took him to the door and threw him over the threshold, after which I rushed back upstairs. "How long ago?" I shouted to Linda. She chickened out and didn't say anything. "How long have you been having sex with this freak?" I asked again. Linda stared at me with tears in her eyes. "About 2 months. I didn't mean it, Don. It just happened that way." "Yes, exactly. Clean yourself up and get this place in order before the kids get home." "I'm leaving for a while and will be back home at the usual time," I quipped before walking down the stairs and out of the house. I parked my car in a local parking lot and went for a walk to think things over. Until today, I was sure that Linda loved me as much as I loved her. I had no idea that she was cheating on me with my so-called best friend. Nothing had changed at home. There was nothing that could make me suspicious. I decided that I could not ignore this. I could forgive some mistakes, but not this one. I decided not to tell Linda anything except that I needed time to think. That evening, she tried to apologize, but I ignored her and fell asleep on the couch. The next day, I called work and took the rest of the week off. Luckily, no one asked why. My lawyer tried to talk me out of filing for divorce, saying I wouldn't come out of it too well. I told him it was my business and that he should sue Linda as soon as he could. My next trip was to the bank. Babut. I moved most of our savings out of Linda's reach. As far as I understand, she does not deserve to receive money from me. When I got home, Linda tried to talk to me. I raised my hand to stop her. "I don't care about your pathetic excuses, Linda. Leave me alone." Linda began to cry as she left. I locked myself in my home office so as not to see her. When the children returned from school, I went down to them, and they were both glad that I was early today. Linda was talking on her cell phone while I was chatting with the kids. Gail is 9, and I don't think she understands what's going on. Nick, on the other hand, was watching me and Linda and I could tell from his face that he knew something was wrong. Seeing that I was watching her, Linda ended the call and came to talk to the children. There is never a good time to make an announcement like mine, but I have decided to make it now. Told the children that Mom and Dad don't love each other anymore. I assured them that I would still be around and see them as often as I could. Linda had a look of shock on her face. I think if there were no children nearby, it would have ended in screaming. Nick sat quietly, looking at the floor. Gail sat on my lap and snuggled up, crying her heart out. I looked at Linda with a look that said, "It's all your fault." Linda turned and went into the kitchen. I heard her quietly crying. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Linda tried to talk to me. "Please, Dawn, can we discuss this?" "No, we cannot," I replied before heading to my home office. I slept in my office chair all night just to avoid Linda's whining. When Linda took the kids to school the next morning, she said she was going to her parents' house, but I didn't care since I was going to look for a place to live. Luckily, there was an apartment a mile or so from home, so I rented it and returned home to start packing. When Linda returned from her parents, I had already packed almost all my clothes. "So you're leaving?" "Yes." I said I was leaving and nothing you could say or do would change my mind. "Will it help if Alan talks to you and asks for forgiveness?" "No, it won't help. In fact, you can tell that fucking snake to stay away from me. If I see him again, I will most likely finish the work I started the other day." Linda turned away and began to cry. To hell with her tears. It's all her fault anyway. While I was loading things into the car, a man came up to the house and called Linda. "Mrs. Linda Simmons?" he asked. "Yes, I'm Linda Simmons. You have been served." He handed Linda the envelope and turned, quietly leaving. "Please, Dawn, please don't do this to our family." "It wasn't me who did this to our family, Linda." "You did it!" I got into the car and drove away, leaving Linda crying at the door. I filed for divorce citing adultery. Linda asked me to change the wording to irreconcilable differences. I refused to even consider this option. At least let people know who was wrong. Linda signed the papers, but the divorce proceeded slowly. Very slowly. The first weekend, I invited the kids over. Nick asked if I would ever come home. "No, I'm sorry, son. But I won't come back," I answered, holding back tears. Over the next few months, the children stayed with me every other weekend and a few days during school holidays. The divorce was final, and Linda never received any of our savings, although she had the last laugh. My lawyer warned me that I would not come out of this situation healthy. He should have said financially healthy. I ended up paying half the mortgage and child support. I didn't mind the latter, but I was annoyed that I was paying spousal support to Linda. She will receive alimony for 5 years or until she marries. One weekend I learned from the kids that Alan had moved in, which didn't surprise me very much. What made them angry was that Linda told them they should call him Daddy. I won't tolerate this for anything. On Sunday, I picked up the kids and asked Linda if I could talk to her. We went out into the garden so that the children would not hear. Alan was sitting on the terrace and smoking a cigar. The children said that you were telling them that they should call this snake Daddy. This is true? Yes. I decided that they needed their father nearby, and since Alan was here and you weren't, they could call him Dad. How can they do this? They are my children, and I will not allow them to call this freak Dad. Alan stood up as if about to make a scene. Sit down, you idiot, if you don't want to get another good beating. Linda stared at me, folding her hands in front of her. I'm serious, Linda. You shouldn't let your children call this creature Daddy. I'll agree that they call him Uncle Alan, but nothing more. When they're old enough, they can call him whatever the damn name they want. Just to put it all in perspective, now that you and that bastard live here, I'm cutting my mortgage payments by 1/3. He can make up the difference. I left, leaving the couple behind stunning silence. After this conversation, the relationship between Linda and I became so bad that I did not go into the house to pick up or drop off the children on the weekends. Work took off, and I was promoted to a position with a substantial increase in salary. I didn't tell Linda or the kids about this for fear that she would demand more money from me. As it turns out, I didn't need to worry. The next time I picked up the children, Linda asked if she could talk to me. I reluctantly agreed, and we were back in the garden. "Dawn, I thought you should know this. Alan asked me to marry him." I didn't answer, just shrugged and walked away smiling. These idiots clearly forgot that if Linda got married, my spousal benefits would stop. On the Monday after their wedding, I canceled the direct transfer. When Linda asked where her money was that month, I replied, "You got married, Linda," which freed me from the obligation to make a monthly payment. I hung up, smiling as I did so. Before I could hang up, I heard Linda mutter the word, "shit." In a way, I was angry because I was still paying off a third of the mortgage even though I had agreed to it so the kids could have a roof over their heads. Thanks to the pay raise and the money I saved by not paying Linda, I took out a mortgage and bought myself a house. The kids loved the house, even though it required a lot of work. Nick was 14 and understood perfectly well why Linda and I got divorced, and I think Gail knew too, but she didn't talk about it. With the help of the children, I sorted out the garden. The grass in the backyard was so tall that I expected to find the camp of an unknown tribe in it. The kids had their own rooms, and I let them choose their own colors. Within reason, of course. One day, Linda asked if I could take the kids and the following weekend. Apparently, she and Alan needed some alone time. I politely declined because I have my own plans for the weekend. Actually, I didn't have any plans, but I wasn't going to help her. My new neighbors welcomed me with joy, and my children became friends with 2 children from the neighboring house. The only lonely person on the street was a widow of 60 years old. I didn't start dating because the children were more important to me, but that all changed when my neighbor Nicola introduced me to her sister Judy. Judy had never been married, which surprised me considering how beautiful she was. Judy was about 6'3", of medium build, with curves in all the right places. That's how I would describe her. After a few dates, I introduced Judy to my children. I don't know if Judy was nervous, but I'm sure she was. They all got along so well that by the end of the evening we were acting like a normal family. Gail had a huge crush on Judy, and she turned to her for advice several times. I found out the reason for this a few weeks later when I took them home. Linda and Alan didn't get along well. I guess marriage is different from friendly sex. Linda began drinking heavily at home, while Alan spent most of his evenings out drinking in pubs and bars. Things got so bad that Gail called one evening and asked Ed if I could come and help. Linda was drunk and in a bad state. I helped Gail lift Linda upstairs, and Gail undressed her mother and put her to bed. All this time, Alan was not visible. The 3 of us had just sat down when there was a knock on the door. I opened it and saw 2 policemen. "How can I help you, officers?" "We're looking for Mrs. Carter." "Sorry, she's upstairs in bed. I doubt I'll be able to wake her up tonight. I am her ex-husband. Can I help with anything?" I spent a few minutes explaining my reasons for coming here, and the children confirmed my story, and the officers told me the bad news. Mr. Alan Carter died this evening. He crashed his car into a tree. I'm afraid he died instantly. I assured the officers that I would stay and notify my ex-wife when she woke up in the morning. The children were quiet, but none of them cried when the officers told us about Alan. "This will destroy Mom," Nick said, looking at Gail. She, in turn, nodded in agreement. I told them to go to bed and we'd figure it out in the morning. As much as I despised Alan for what he had done, I didn't want to tell Linda that he was dead. Of course, I didn't like them for what they did, but I wasn't going to take any pleasure from it. The next morning, Linda staggered down the stairs, hungover and looking like crap. The drinking had clearly affected her appearance. She stared at me and asked aggressively, "What the hell are you doing here?" I explained that I came last night when Gail called for help. "Well, as you can see, I'm fine. You can leave." "Linda, you better sit down and shut up," I replied. Linda looked at me, then decided to sit down. "Okay, what does this all mean, Dawn? I don't have time for games." "No games, Linda. While you were sleeping drunk yesterday, the police came to see you. What do they need from me? I did not do anything bad." "Sorry, Linda. They came about Alan." The police have come to tell you that Alan died in a traffic accident last night. All we know is that he crashed his car into a tree, and they suspect he was drunk." Linda sat staring at me for what seemed like an eternity. She put her head in her hands and burst into tears. The children tried to console her, but it was pointless. I stayed in case I was needed, but after about an hour, I excused myself and left. As I said, I despised Alan for what he and Linda did to destroy our family, but I never wanted him dead. Out of respect for him and for the sake of the children, I attended his funeral. Linda didn't talk to me, but her parents thanked me for being there to support her. I'm here for the children and for no other reason. As far as I understand, Linda bought it all herself. Linda's parents looked shocked, then quietly turned and walked away. I stood with the children while Linda was alone at the grave. One evening, about a month after the funeral, Nick called me frantically. "Dad, please come quickly. Mom has gone crazy. She beats up Gail and throws things around like crazy." I said I was on my way and rushed to my car and then rushed to the house. On the way, I called the police and told me what Nick told me. They said that several officers had already left. I arrived at the house a little before the police and ran inside, leaving the door open. The house looked like a war zone. Linda was drunk and throwing things around. "You are a bastard! It's your fucking fault!" she shouted to me when something flew past my head. Dodging everything that was thrown, I approached Gail, who was lying on the floor. 2 police officers entered and immediately subdued Linda. She was still swearing and calling me every name under the sun, and then attacked the officers, calling them some vile names. As officers escorted Linda outside to a waiting police van, paramedics arrived and treated Gail while I spoke with the officer. I looked back and saw Nick coming down the stairs with a bloody towel on his head. "Sorry, Dad. I tried to stop my mom hitting Gail. She turned to me and hit me on the head with something heavy. That's when I called you. Don't worry, son. You did everything you could," I assured Nick. Gail began to come to, and one of the paramedics examined Nick. "You have a nasty cut, young man. I'm afraid you'll have to get stitches." Nick winced slightly when the paramedic told him the good news. The children left to be examined at the hospital. I assured them that I would arrive as soon as I finished speaking with the police. At the hospital, the doctor said that Gail was in shock, other than that she had no serious injuries. Nick had to get stitches on the cut. The doctor told them both not to exert themselves for a few days. The next day, I took them back to the house so they could each pack a bag. Told them to pack enough for at least a week. I had no idea what would happen to Linda, but right now I didn't care. Back at my house, I told the kids to unpack, and then we'd figure out the food. Takeout seemed like the best option since I wasn't in the mood to cook. While the children were packing their things, I was sitting with a cup of coffee. But my peace was interrupted by a knock on the door. I opened it and saw Judy. "I came to visit my sister and noticed your car at the house. Are you okay, Dawn?" "Not really, Judy. You better come in." I sat down and told her what happened earlier. "Oh my God, are the kids okay?" "They're upstairs, putting their things in the rooms. I said I would call them for takeout when they finished." "No, Dawn. No takeout. You go and look after the children and I'll start cooking. If I can't find something, I'll ask where it is, or go and borrow it from the nice lady next door." We both laughed at this joke. When the kids came downstairs, Gail immediately ran up to Judy for a hug. I had to stop myself from crying when I realized that my daughter felt safer with someone she had only known for a few months, rather than with her own mother. Linda's parents bailed her out and foolishly took her back to the house instead of theirs. I learned that Linda was accused of assaulting children and also assaulting a police officer. Apparently, when she was uncuffed at the station, she broke free and hit the officer who was arresting her. When Linda left the house one morning, I went into the house and gathered the remaining things of the children. I didn't file for custody. I just wasn't going to leave them with her anymore. Law be damned. Linda received 2 years probation for the assault charges and was ordered to get help for her drinking problem. Her parents finally woke up and realized how bad she was and took her in with them. Linda's father suggested that I sell the house since she had no plans to move back into it anytime soon. I thought about moving in with my children, but they didn't want to come back to the house that I considered theirs. I sold the house pretty quickly. When all expenses were covered, I deposited the remaining amount in the bank. Legally, I owed Linda half, but she couldn't get it until she solved her drinking problem. For me and the children, life went on. It was strange that they were not bothered by Linda's absence. Gail formed the strongest bond with Judy that I've ever seen, and Nick made new friends and looked happy for the first time in years. I didn't keep track of how Linda was doing, and her parents didn't feel the need to keep me informed either. I didn't know it, but everything was about to change. It all started when the kids went to bed and Judy asked if we could talk. The dreaded, "we need to talk," flashed through my head. "Of course, Judy. What's on your mind?" "I want to talk about us. By us, I mean me, you, and the children." I just stared at her and nodded. "I know things haven't been easy for you lately. Because of the divorce. Because you became a part-time father. What I'm trying to say is that I really admire you for being such a strong person, and that admiration has turned into love. I love you, Dawn. I just need to know that you feel something for me." Wow. I was stunned for a few moments as I saw Judy looking at me, waiting for an answer. "Judy, I really love you. I guess because of everything that's going on, I just didn't tell you. You've helped me a lot these past few months, and I know that without you, I wouldn't have done as well as we did. So, yes, I love you, and please don't think I'm just saying that. I'm sorry if I didn't show you how much you mean to me. Because of everything else, I just didn't have time to say anything. Dawn, I knew you loved me. I just needed to hear you say it, you big fool. The fact that you didn't tell me you loved me is one of the few things you've missed here lately. Did you know that Gail got her period?" God. No, I didn't know. When did it start? "She came to me a few weeks before the incident with Linda. Girls these days know more than I did at her age, but she was still concerned. She even called me Mom once, and I don't think she even realized she did it. Perhaps it's because you've been more like a mother to her lately." To be honest, I didn't know or notice anything special. I wasn't surprised that Gail approached Judy about her period. It's unlikely that a girl would want to discuss it with her father. I sat down and smiled at Judy. She looked at me in confusion. "Judy, I want to ask you something, and please be honest with me. If I asked you to marry me, would you like to have more children in the future?" Judy sat up and smiled. "If you ask me to marry you, I will say yes. When it comes to children, the answer is no. Now it's my turn to be honest. I have known for many years that I cannot have children. This probably explains why I am still single. As soon as the guy finds out that I can't have children, he finds an excuse to leave me. I loved your children as if they were my own. They are wonderful, and this is your merit." Judy joined me on the sofa. We hugged and started kissing, and it wasn't long before we headed upstairs to bed. We both agreed not to tell the children anything about our conversation. I told Judy that I wanted to talk to them alone first. It was a little white lie. The next day, I left work early and visited a local jewelry store. After explaining to the saleswoman that I wanted a ring and approximately what size, I began to choose. Not wanting to give up, I decided to go home at the usual time, but due to traffic problems, I ended up 10 minutes later than usual. While I usually changed before dinner, I sat down to dinner in my suit. When we finished eating, I stood up, and Judy and the kids probably thought I was going to change. Judy was just about to get up and start clearing the table when I got down on one knee, holding the open ring box in front of me. "Judy, will you do me the honor of marrying me?" Finally. "Thank God, I didn't think you'd think of that, Dad," Nick said with a smile. Judy was still in shock. She looked at the ring and then at me. Yes, I will do it," she said before bursting into tears. Judy stood up and hugged me. She teared up and wiped her eyes before kissing me. The tears started again as Gail hugged us both. "Does this mean I can call you Mom now?" Judy and Gail hugged. Nick shook my hand and gave me a manly hug. It was then that I realized that none of the children had mentioned their mother or how she might react. Personally, I didn't care. In my eyes, it was none of her business. When the children visited Linda, they told her that I was getting married again. She just shrugged and changed the subject. Nick told me that Linda is getting help for her drinking and she looks much better than the last time they saw each other. By this time, I had applied for and received legal custody of the children. Linda was given extensive visitation rights, but for some reason known only to her, she saw the children once a month at best. After making sure Linda wasn't drinking, I wrote her a check for her half of the house sale. She thanked me and didn't say anything else. Her father thanked me for giving her the money. He said they hope she will use them to start a new life. Shortly after Judy and I got married, the kids went to see Linda, but they came back and said she wasn't there and her parents had no idea where she was. Judy said that Linda was probably starting a new life and would contact them when she got settled, but that never happened. One evening, Linda's father called and said he had bad news. We sat as he explained that Linda had moved out and moved in with a guy she met in rehab. It turned out that this guy was using drugs. Police say Linda and this guy, James, died of overdoses. He started using drugs again, and Linda got hooked on them too. Once Linda's funeral was over, the children never mentioned her again. At least, not in my presence. Gail treated Judy like her mother. Nick started calling her mom since we got married. I watched Judy and the kids interact with each other and couldn't help but think about how Linda had screwed up her life and then completely screwed it up by taking drugs and ending it.
Thanks for hanging out and listening. If you liked the story, hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. Make sure to check out our other wild tales right here on the end screen. Catch you in the next story.